At various points, I've spotlighted what I think are the negative consequences that are fairly obvious of people like Donald Trump and other Republicans being incurious in general, and especially in terms of reading and studying and researching and learning about the world. They're very often not particularly interested in that. And if you read Donald Trump's tweets, you look at his reading comprehension level, his writing level, it makes pretty clear that he's not that sort of person who's going to read a lot of books and learn a lot about the world outside of his own personal experience. And that has some, I think, very obvious negative consequences. But we have to be fair. And it turns out that sometimes they can actually read books, and that can be even scarier than their general illiteracy. And when it comes to Republicans like Donald Trump and like the sorts of people he's stuffed his cabinet with, there's always one author that they have found time to read in their life. And you're not going to be surprised to find out it's Ayn Rand. Or Ayn Rand, or however the hell she wanted to pronounce her name. So, look, Katie Holloway over at Alternet went through the backgrounds of a lot of the people that have been put onto Trump's cabinet, has collected some biographical information about them. And so she noticed this interesting trend, and I want to talk about the consequences of it. So it turns out that all of them, including Donald Trump, have at various points said that either their favorite book is one of the books by Ayn Rand, or that they personally identify with one of the characters from the books. Like Donald Trump personally thinks that he himself is like Howard Roark from The Fountainhead, and Tillerson, of course, absolutely loves Ayn Rand. Then you have Paul Ryan, who's going to be sort of the legislative ally of the Donald Trump administration, who has very often talked about how it changed his life. And for those sorts of like, quasi-libertarian, but definitely economically hard right people, it always goes back to Ayn Rand. They read that when they're a little boy, almost always a boy, and it takes over their mind, and they think that the ramblings of this insane woman, a woman who lived a life that they find reprehensible by today's standards and ended up going on the government dole, as she was deserved to, but had often talked against in her books. They think that that is gospel. I think in many cases, if they had to do it in private and they had to choose between the Bible and Ayn Rand, I think it'd be a very easy choice for them. And so I want to talk about what it means that Donald Trump and his chief ally in Congress, and then most of his cabinet, all seem to love these books. And understand, for background purposes, I have read these books. I'm not simply looking from the outside as a lib. I've read The Fountainhead. I've read Atlas Shrugged. I've read The Virtue of Selfishness. I've read Anthem. I've read a bunch of her books, and I did it because I liked reading, and because these are noteworthy books. And at one point, I was going through the top 100 novels of all time, and it happened to be on there, a couple of them, for historical purposes, not because they were well written. So first of all, from the point of view of a reader, they're extremely poorly written books. The characters are all caricatures, and you could say that that's part of it being, I don't know, a political statement, is that they can't be real people, but they're all fake people. They're either all good or all bad. Every one of her books, I don't think that she's ever edited out a word from one of her books. There's at one point a speech in Atlas Shrugged that's like 68 pages long, just for that one speech. It's insanity, but people make it through it, including me. And basically what it teaches, if you're not familiar with her writings, is that selfishness is a good thing, altruism is a cancer, and the only way that a country, especially America, can become stronger is if those who produce are protected, or protect themselves, I should say, against those parasites who try to steal the things that they make. And that is what government is. Government is an attempt by the parasites to take away the production of the strong, powerful alpha males who make this stuff. Or actually, I should say, she actually, in terms of gender, had like Dagny Taggart and stuff like that. So she would occasionally let women be these terrible business despots as well. And that is what they grow up. When you read these books, you then think government is evil. And government is being manipulated by the poor, by the parasites, by the worms to take away what I, an upstanding rich man, have made. Now, of course, this is historically insane. If you look back over the history of the US government, except at very brief periods, you know that it has almost always been controlled by and used for the interests of the wealthiest among us. Business regulations are very often controlled by people who work in business. The government subsidizes any number of different businesses to the tunes of literally billions of dollars every single year. The idea that simply because Social Security and Medicare exist, that means government is by and for the worms, is absurd. And the books themselves and their philosophy is a self-caricature like her actual characters are. Now, if you read these books as an adult, all of this will be immediately obvious to you. The danger is that many young people read these books. And of course, they should be allowed to. I'm not saying anything about that. But I'm saying if you don't have the critical thinking apparatus necessary to work through these complex topics and understand the bias that the author was working with, it can become very clear to you that this is actually what's going on. Kids like simplistic political philosophies. That appeals to them. And Ayn Rand also appeals to them. And so then looking forward to Donald Trump's administration, what could this possibly mean? Well, if the wealthiest are the best, and if the poorest are the parasites, I don't think it's all that difficult to figure out what their tax policies are going to be like, or what their approach to business regulation are going to be like, or perhaps their approach to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other of the elements of the social safety net. All of those things basically are an unfair attack on the wealthy and an attempt to prop up people who aren't worthy of that assistance. And in so doing, propping them up in that way makes them weaker. And so it's actually immoral to do so. You should cast them off into the woods to fend off the bears and the wolves, metaphorically, to make themselves stronger. Now, this has always been a part of conservative philosophy, but it's never been as strong and distilled as it is in the works of Ayn Rand. And for people who don't often read very much, if that's what stands out from literature for them, that's a very bad sign for the future of the Trump administration and America.